All right, welcome back to another enlightening episode of the All Me podcast. I'm your host, Don Hooten Jr., and today we have a distinguished guest who is an expert in the realm of anti-doping. So joining us today is none other than Dr. Matthew Fedoruk, who is the science director at the United States Anti-Doping Agency and renowned authority in his field. Dr. Fedoruk is a leading voice around the world when it comes to anti-doping. And today I've invited him on the All Me podcast to discuss a powerful and controversial anabolic steroid commonly used in the world of bodybuilding and athletics. With a wealth of experience and deep understanding of the physiological impacts on performance-enhancing substances, we are going to shed some light on the complexities and implications of Trenbolone use, otherwise known as Tren. So thank you so much, Dr. Fedoruk, for joining us, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Don. Thanks for having me on and really excited to talk about this really important topic and glad to be an expert and able to share my thoughts.
Well, outstanding. I'm so glad you're here. And, you're one of the most respected people in the world of anti-doping. And everyone has a unique story of sort of what led you down your career path. But why did you become so passionate about the topic of anti-doping?
Yeah, I grew up in Canada, so I'm an import, but I grew up as a downhill ski racer, a downhill alpine ski racer, and achieved a fair amount of success there. But my passion was always science, and went on to do an undergrad and grad school, a PhD in pathology and laboratory medicine, and studied prostate cancer. So I'm actually trained as a molecular biologist, but for my postdoctoral work, I started out in industry and was actually doing some interesting work in developing nucleic acid drug delivery systems. So basically new ways of drug delivery. And then through that work, actually got a second postdoc in doing some anti-doping science research. And this was looking into the effects and developing new tests around blood doping. And that actually led to an interesting association with the Vancouver 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Games. So after my postdoctoral research, they needed to build a laboratory in Vancouver to analyze all the athlete samples from the Olympic and Paralympic Games, the Winter Games that were hosted there. So I was hired to work with the Montreal laboratory to bring all of their staff out to Vancouver and conduct thousands of tests on urine and blood during the course of the Olympics and Paralympics. And that kind of snowballed after that and ended up down at the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency here in Colorado in 2011. So I've been down in the States with my family, living in Colorado for the last almost 13 years now.
Interesting. Yeah, I had no idea your background as a skier. Do you still ski today?
I do, and I love skiing with my two girls, and we headed to the mountains as much as possible.
Well, good. Yeah, I've skied probably 10 times in my whole life. It's a very, very difficult sport, but it's a peaceful sport. It's nice. I don't do any of that difficult stuff, probably like you do. But when you're coming down the hill and it's just nothing but a beautiful view, and it's really, really quiet. If you've never been around the snow, and I know some people listening might have never been around the snow, it's super quiet, and it's just a great sport and really good exercise as well.
Yeah, we love taking advantage of the outdoors here in Colorado, and there's nothing better than skiing an awesome powder day up in the mountains here.
I bet it is. So you're the chief science officer with USADA, the United States Anti-Doping Agency. Can you give our listeners sort of a background of what is USADA, what is your role there, and what do you guys do?
Yeah, great question. And USADA is the Congress recognized national anti-doping organization in the United States. And we're responsible for Olympic, Paralympic, and Pan American sport. So really we are mandated in order to, protect the integrity of sport and the health of athletes. And we serve athletes every single day by delivering a globally recognized anti-doping program. So if you're an elite level athlete in the United States, you may be part of our registered testing pool, but we test both summer and winter sports. And we also are involved in some professional sport testing as well. But really the four pillars of our program are education, testing, science and research, and then of course the results management and the independence of that go into making sure that we follow up with any positive tests and any associated penalties associated with that.
So, with your role and as much work as you guys do around the world, do you get to travel a lot and see different countries?
I do. I have a pretty busy travel schedule, and that involves interacting with many international expert scientific groups, developing new methods for detection. We're involved in offering our expertise to develop the best policies and procedures and rule sets in order to best serve the athletes that we are aiming to protect. So yeah, I'm on the road quite a bit, see a fair bit of the world, but really enjoy it and hopefully make a large contribution to the global anti-doping movement.
Yeah, and that's super cool that you get to travel and do all that. But I also know how passionate you guys are and how important your work is, especially as it relates to the athletes. Just having an opportunity to kind of see both sides of it on the anti-doping side as well as the athlete side, and how important that is and what that means being an athlete, that there's somebody there helping protect them to keep sport clean and a fair playing field. So we're lucky to have you today and to share some of your expertise. And as we were kind of talking before the interview, over the past, I would say 12 months or so, a majority of our programs following them will have young students come up. And this is typically high school students. And what they're coming up and asking is they're saying, hey, what do you think about Trenbolone? And, I'm kind of like mind boggled why they're asking about this specific anabolic steroid. And a couple months back, I had 3 or 4 students approach me after a program, and they're done. What do you think about Tren? We hear it's safe and all this stuff. And I said, pause just for a minute, guys. Like, can we have a quick conversation? Where are you getting this information from? So they grab their phone and they start pulling up TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. Like, are you not following all these different fitness influencers? I said, well, I'm not, but now I am. And we need to probably follow some of these folks to get an understanding of what they're talking about. So I kind of just want to jump right into Trenbolone to give young people the expert view on what this stuff is, what does it do. So let's just start with, I guess, just the generalities of what the heck is Trenbolone.
Yeah, great question. And I really, I was listening to your introduction, and I really think it's important. The education component is a key component here, because we want to give the right facts as experts to make sure people and athletes are well informed of the what substances they may be exposed to, what people are talking about, and the health risks associated with that are real, that may be underplayed by the media or social media influencers. So Trenbolone is like many anabolic steroids. It's a dangerous anabolic steroid. It is a controlled substance in the United States. It's illegal to distribute and possess, and it is derived, as all anabolic steroids are. They're actually derived from testosterone itself. So many of your listeners will be familiar with testosterone. It's a anabolic steroid that our bodies produce, and it's necessary for normal human functioning, especially in males. It causes a lot of masculinization and characteristics that are that make males who we are, and it's produced all the time in male bodies, and to a much lesser extent in females as well. But chemists have come up with ways to modify testosterone in order to make it more potent. So essentially, that's what anabolic steroids are. They're synthetic forms of testosterone that have been modified in order to have more potent or different characteristics that are designed for the use that they may be prescribed for. And in the case of Trenbolone, it's actually not approved in any country for human use. It's a veterinary medicine that is used in the United States, given to cattle in order to promote muscle growth and meat development during that phase in which animals are growing really rapidly. So it's actually approved for that use and safe for that use in humans. in animals, but it's not safe. And being given to humans, it can have different characteristics that may be harmful to human beings, which is why it's not approved by the Food and Drug Administration or any governmental agency for clinical use in the United States.
Yeah, and you kind of think about the size of a cattle versus a human being. You're talking 1,000 pounds versus your average guy that's 150 to 250 pounds. It's an awful difference in weight and size. Now, how are these drugs administered? Like, let's say you're administering to a cattle, or somebody is taking these illegal. Is this going to come in a pill form, a cream, or even an injectable?
Yeah, so with Trenbolone, it actually comes in injectable form, and in cattle, it's injected into the ear of the animal as a pellet, and that pellet then disintegrates over time, and as it disintegrates, it releases the Trenbolone into the animal, and then has the anabolic effect in the animal. In humans, it's often sold on the black market, and it can be sold in injectable forms. And what that means is that it can be dissolved in different oils that make it able to be injected into the muscle. So you need to use a needle in order to do that. And I suppose you could use it orally as well. If you possess the pellet, you could take it orally. But when we take an anabolic agent orally, it has different metabolic, or it is processed by the body differently than injectables, which could lead to different side effects and metabolites that can have different effects on different organs of the body.
Interesting. Do you know why Trenbolone, I mean, you're able to use it in veterinary use, and I know there's some testosterone derivatives that you can use in veterinary, as well as there's some designed for human. How come it isn't approved for the use in humans? Is there a reason that it's not approved? Are there other drugs that are available that I guess that are better? I guess that's what I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think due to both the availability of different drugs to treat medical conditions that are better, have less of a side effect profile, are more appropriate for use, easier to administer. For all those reasons, there's different availability of drugs to treat conditions that require replacement of male hormones, or what are known as androgens, such as testosterone. So for that reason, it's very specific to veterinary use in the United States, and we don't see any human preparations. Although on the black market, of course, it's available and traditionally been used by bodybuilders actually to promote muscle growth, and as well. In bodybuilding, I think some bodybuilders are interested in, that lean physique, the hardness of the muscle, and anecdotally, it's known to promote those characteristics. But again, not without some well characterized and actually very dangerous side effects from using this non-approved medication.
And I'm glad you said that, just because I've had the opportunity to go out, and you always like to listen to both sides and what people are using and what they aren't talking about as the side effects. But you'll also hear people within the bodybuilding and fitness industry referring to Trenbolone as like the monster of all anabolic steroids. It's super, super powerful. So as it relates to some of the side effects, how soon can someone see side effects if they start taking these drugs? And what are some of those side effects? Are they the same as many of the other anabolic steroids? Are they different with Trenbolone? Are they worse? Can you sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah, great question. And generally with the anabolic steroids, the side effects are dependent on, the amount of use and the duration of use. So, the longer it's used and the higher doses that are used, you can generally see greater effects. With growing adolescence and youth, I think those effects can be more pronounced because your body's in a constant state of change, and therefore you have the potential to affect those changes in a negative fashion, and even in a permanent way by using a permanent harmful way by using anabolic steroids. So I'll start with the effects on our endocrine system, or the system that produces all the hormones that flow through our bodies. And our bodies are really good at regulating the amount of hormones that are produced so that we're not producing too little, we're not producing too much. And that starts in the brain through an organ called the pituitary gland. And that's kind of a signal regulator to say, okay, now it's time to release certain hormones that are responsible for our normal functioning, maybe for our growth. And what taking anabolic steroids does, it messes up that feedback system. So when you have a synthetic steroid circulating in your blood, when it hits the brain and it says, okay, the brain recognizes it as a synthetic hormone, or a hormone that's like something that our bodies are producing, it actually signals the brain to turn off the natural production of testosterone. So you no longer have two hormones flowing through your body. Now you've got the synthetic hormone. And by shutting off the natural testosterone, you can suppress that in ways that, if it's not being produced, even long after you stop using the anabolic steroid, your natural production of testosterone is going to be suppressed. And that may take a long time to come back. It may come back more quickly. It may be permanently altered depending on the dose of the steroid that you're actually using. So that's a pretty serious side effect, and something that you don't want to be messing with your endocrine system. Also, with anabolic steroids, the other major effect is that they have to be metabolized by our body. And that metabolic process happens primarily in our liver. And some of these steroids, because of their structure, their chemical structure, when they're metabolized and broken apart by our body, they can act, those constituents or metabolites can be toxic to our liver. So you might have heard about the word hepatotoxicity and causing these toxic effects. So those can have negative effects on cholesterol. They can have negative effects on other regulatory hormones in our bodies. And that can be dangerous. It can lead to things like jaundice or other side effects in our bodies that you don't want to be messing with that. And that can, end up with admissions to the ER, or even, depending on the dose of the steroid, that those toxic effects could even lead to death.
So in 2014, there was a case study of a 23-year-old young man who had a heart attack as a result of using these drugs. Why would these drugs cause this young man to have a heart attack? I mean, is that directly related? Is that something common? Is it uncommon? Can you sort of talk a little bit more about that case study, if you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you inject these drugs, they go into our bloodstream and they have what are known as systemic effects. So although as an athlete, you may be looking to build muscles in your arms or legs, or, have a bigger physique, the effects of these anabolic agents don't stop just there. Our heart is actually a muscle that can be affected by anabolic steroids. So that heart isn't left out when you're taking anabolic steroids. And that's what leads to some of these really profound harmful effects of steroids, is that they can have effects on our cardiac muscle. They can have effects on our blood by increasing the number of red blood cells that our bodies produce. And so they can lead to the thickening of the blood, which causes our heart to have to work harder. So these systemic effects are not limited to just building muscle growth. They have effects that are, not necessarily related to that, but then that causes harmful side effects that can end up, causing not an increase in performance, but actually a decrease in performance and harmful to our health.
So I guess it's safe to say the misinformation they're getting from fitness influencers out there that Tren is a very safe anabolic steroid is not a very true comment.
I would say no.
So when we're talking about Trenbolone, you'll often hear the term ester. If you go out online and you're Googling this stuff, or you're going through some of these videos, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube, what is an ester and sort of what is the difference between Trenbolone and Trenbolone acetate? Is there a difference between these drugs, and what do these terms mean?
Yeah, an ester is typically a chemical modification that is added to a steroid. And the reason for it adding an ester is that it prolongs the circulation half-life in our bodies. So when you want a drug to have an effect, as I mentioned before, the liver is responsible for metabolizing these substances. And in order to prolong the effect of these substances, when you make these substances chemically, you can add ester chains, which are in different lengths, which essentially allow for longer circulation and a longer effect. So you don't have to maybe inject them as often, and you can use them more occasionally rather than having to use them, say, once a day or twice a day in order to get the effect.
Interesting. So would that be the difference, I guess, between Trenbolone and Trenbolone acetate? It would have esters in there to prolong the effects of the drug?
Yeah, the acetate is essentially an ester molecule, and there's different types of esters that are attached to anabolic agents. When you're talking about testosterone, one of the more common esters is called testosterone cypionate. So that's actually an approved drug in the United States. And so that just modifies, as I said, the pharmacology of the drug that allows for a different type of metabolism in the body.
Interesting. So anybody out there that's interested in Trenbolone, you're interested in anabolic steroids, and you start going out, you're going to start hearing some of these terms, and you're doing a great job of making it very easy to understand of what these things are. So thank you. So why do you think there has been an uptick, whether it's the use of Trenbolone or whether, more social media influencers are talking about it? Are you guys seeing an uptick with professional athletes?
Yeah, Trenbolone it's very easy to detect Trenbolone. So if you're subject to a drug testing program, Trenbolone and its metabolite epitrenbolone are quite readily detectable in the urine. And I'm not sure why it's being marketed as a safe anabolic agent. I don't think there's anything that can be described as a safe steroid. But certainly with the influence of social media and giving personal examples and sharing personal history, people can relate to that and maybe understand that information as possibly safe. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it may be one of the challenges with obtaining anabolic steroids on the black market, which is typically where they're purchased, is, as I mentioned, Trenbolone is primarily an injectable steroid. Well, you don't know how that was prepared, who it was prepared by, what the constituents of that vial are. So, you got to worry about things like infections, serious. When you're injecting something, you may think it's a steroid in there, but we actually know that a lot of the steroids sold on the internet aren't steroids at all. There may not be anything in there. There's no quality control that's done by these black market providers to be able to control for that. They're in it for the money, and they're in it to sell as much product as possible. So it's really buyer beware. And you don't want to be the person admitted to the ER because you've had some immune reaction to the injection, or you're getting necrosis at the injection site and it's causing your skin to die because you've got some infection there. So these are serious problems that your listeners may not think about, that are real issues from users and well-documented cases that are happening.
Yeah, and they're certainly not being discussed when somebody's promoting this type of drug is safe. So I'm just thinking to that high school kid that approaches us after a program. We finished delivering our education program. They come up and they're going to ask the question, Don, what do you think about Tren? And what we'd like to be able to do is take this podcast, and they're going to be able to go download it, come watch it, listen to whatever the case might be. So Dr. Fedoruk, what would you want to say directly to that high school student that's asking that question?
Yeah, I would just say, is buyer beware. Do not believe everything you hear on the internet. Just because somebody looks sexy or has a really awesome physique doesn't mean that they, were actually even using that steroid to get there. They are in it for the business and the financial gains around that. So really think beyond what you're hearing and make good decisions. There are no shortcuts. And if you're an athlete, we want to promote, eating right, using the best possible training programs, being safe about it, consulting well-respected experts and people that know what they're talking about. And I would say, you risk your health by using these types of anabolic substances, and that could result in some pretty serious side effects, some of them that are not reversible, and in some cases, the worst cases, even possible death.
Yeah, it's great advice. And it's coming from somebody that's a world-renowned expert on this, where you've had the opportunity to travel the world and work with the world's best athletes, not just here in the United States, but Olympians from around the world. Is there anything we might have missed on this topic that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Don, I don't think so. I really welcome the invitation, and I think it's been an awesome discussion. And if I can boil it down in simple terms and make sure people understand, what we're talking about and the true risks associated with this, we've done our jobs. And if there's anything that USADA can do further to offer information to your listeners, I encourage you to go to our website, usada.org. We've got information for athletes on the side effects of not just anabolic agents, but performance enhancing drugs in general. So I encourage everybody to use us as a resource as much as possible.
Outstanding. We'll be able to put a link in the show notes for that too. But before I let you go, one of the most popular parts of our podcast is what we call our curveball round. So what I've done is I've actually put together 3 different questions that have nothing to do with anti-doping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first question to you as fast as you can think of the answer, spit it out. And sometimes these are super fun. You let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm nervous, but I'm ready.
Here we go. The first question is, would you rather live in the ocean or live on the moon?
I would rather live in the ocean.
Me too. When I picked that question too, I love being underwater. All right. So the next one here, one of the biggest TV networks gives you your very own late night talk show. Who are you inviting as your first guest?
Oh boy. Man, I don't know. Taylor Swift has been in the news a lot. That would probably be a pretty popular first guest.
Yeah, I think you would draw a lot of views with that. And I was sitting here first thing like, wow, could you imagine somebody giving you that opportunity? Last question before we let you go. This is an interesting one. If you had to delete all but 3 apps from your smartphone, what 3 apps are you keeping?
Oh, wow. Google Maps. Maybe oh geez, probably I love reading the news, so I'm probably keeping some of the news apps that I follow. And since I travel so much, probably one of my my airline apps that I rely on so much.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about maps, but I'm one of those people. Like I need to use the map in town. I don't know how people did it before we had GPS in our hands. Well, Dr. Fedoruk, again, thank you so much for joining the All Me podcast. This has been awesome. You did such a great job of, talking about this topic in a way that us common folks can understand and really get our mind around it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Don, for having me today.